Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Simon and Friends podcast on YouTube. I am Simon Short. Joining me today is John from Bite Size Sports. John, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, man. Excited to jump into this. You always have really good like series kind of ideas like this, so super psyched to jump into it. And yeah, the draft was fun. This is the first time I'll be able to talk at length about it after it's kind of been digested, So super stoked.
Hashtag team content, man. We're doing what we can. Make sure you are following John, Johnny NFL at John B Boy 12 on Twitter. Everything he's doing on Bite Size, that crew over there. If you've listened to the audio version of this podcast, you have heard them and you've heard John frequently. So make sure you are checking everyone out over there. John and I are going to continue and I think wrap up our little post draft mini series here. Three picks we liked and three picks we did not like at a specific position group. John is going to take us through the DBs. So, John, without further ado, man, take us to your first defensive back selection from the 2024 draft that you really liked.
Yeah, so it was, and we talked a little bit just now pre-show. It was the way it ended up falling was a little unorthodox,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the top corners ended up in great spots because they went in the 20s. There's like Philly, Baltimore, and Detroit all doubled down between day 1 and 2 on corners, like Mitchell and DeJean for
Mm-hmm.
Philly, Wiggins
Mm-hmm.
and TJ Tampa for the Ravens, and then Terry and Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw for the Lions. So I thought those like hauls were really good, but I'm not going to get too specific on any of those. A lot of those were pretty chalk.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tampa fell to like the late fourth, um, but a lot of those were some top guys coming in and not a ton of original analysis to impart, for
Right.
those picks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do want to kind of acknowledge those. Like those were kind of probably at the
Yep.
forefront of a lot of people's minds when they think about this class at DB. But the first one I wanted to talk about, and a lot of this has to do with the situation he landed in, and it's Kamari Lassiter going
Uh-huh.
to Houston.
Yep.
And so he was a lot of people were probably turned off of him with the 40 time.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty in like recovery speed
Mm-hmm.
um, definitely shows up on tape as well. But he's got some short area quickness, and I think when you're going into a D'Amico Ryan's defense, when you're going to be opposite a guy like Derek Stingley, then you're in a situation where it's a cover three heavy scheme. Kamari Lassiter can be your cloud corner
Mm-hmm.
on a lot of downs. He can, um, if they're not in cover three, a lot of times it's quarters with D'Amico as well, which I think plays into Lassiter's skill set. If you can get him into even like some press bail, I think he could survive um, on the outside. And it's just like an interesting uh, group in general. And I think, D'Amico being one of my favorite coaches in the league. I'm a sucker for the former players, but um, I really like, once I thought about it, I'm like, I think I see what he's kind of going for there. And I think the fit will be great. Um, he like in San Fran, he really empowered guys like Diamador Lenore,
Yep.
who was getting targeted constantly. And
Yeah. Uh-huh.
he said something to the effect of, think of that as an opportunity, getting
Mm-hmm.
targeted so much. Don't think of it as much of a negative. And he ended up getting a big pick in the wild card round
Yep.
and sealing that game for him. And so I think, and that's another situation when you're opposite Charvarius Ward, he's able to allow you to do a lot of things on the second level, um, and be flexible there. And not that I feel like he's going to need to be hidden, but I think there's a lot of ways to effectively deploy him within D'Amico's scheme that could be really cool. And I think it's, a match made in heaven for him coming out of this draft. And, it's instead of going somewhere like New Orleans or if Wink was still in Baltimore, whatever, like
Just
you're
on an
not going
island.
to be on an island too
Yep.
much.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to. Yeah, you're not. If you miss, if your punch doesn't really rock them, you're not on that scheme. But yeah, have you thought much about Lassiter? I think like early on, he was probably towards that upper tier, and then
But
throughout the process, sort of fell a little bit farther.
yeah, I mean, the whole way the Houston DB room is shaking out is going to be really interesting because you mentioned the foot speed for Lassiter. A lot of people projected him to have to be go into the nickel, right? Go inside
Right.
when he got to the NFL level. And even if that happens, you mentioned Lenore. Even if that happens and that becomes his full-time role, he's going to be good at it. And he's going to be good at it under
Right.
D'Amico Ryans. But
Mhm.
the way they kind of shook out their draft, they take Kalen Bullock, the safety out of USC. If it's
Yeah.
him and Petrie, right, those are your safeties. You've got Jimmy Ward now in the slide. You've got Stingley as your number one, and you give Lassiter a shot. And with that group, and then the edge rush and pass rush situation that they have, that's about as well isolated as you can be as a cornerback in the NFL in the AFC going against these quarterbacks and these receiver combos that you've got going on. And with D'Amico Ryan's calling the defense and being there to coach you up, you're in as good of a situation as possible. Remember, Derek Stingley didn't have the best rookie year.
Mhm.
Now it wasn't Ryan's yet, but he didn't have the best rookie year. But he really came on. He especially was shining under Ryan. So I think Lassiter could have a similar thing where maybe he doesn't have a great year one. Don't rush to put him into the nickel in year two. See what Ryan's can do with him over a year or two. But I think it's a well insulated DB room for him to walk into. And I did find it super interesting because, yeah, I think they're definitely planning on putting him on the outside because who went right after him, basically, if you look at the corners? Sanders still went after him. Melton went after him. Phillips went after him.
Yep.
So if they were
Yep.
gonna go with like a true nickel, they probably would have gone with one of those guys. I think they're gonna give him the chance to be on the outside. I think that's a good pick because yeah, I think it's a great situation for him to go into. Go ahead, give me your
Yeah, I
number
think
two.
so as
That was a
well.
good
And for
one.
what it's worth, like, oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Last thing on Houston, for what it's worth, last season they disguised coverages at the lowest rate in the NFL.
Mm,
Basically, it was something like 86% of the time. If they line up middle field open, they're in one or three. If they line up middle field closed, you're probably seeing quarters or some variation. So you're also not going to have a ton of pressure on Lassiter early on to, he's not going to have to uh, recover to the deep third out of
yep.
like a disadvantageous position. Not going to be rolling. A lot of times should just be in off zone coverage and be able to use his experience and his ball skills. So another kind of wrinkle to I just like Houston. I think is my problem there. But um, but number two, you may have seen this coming. We were talking about him a little bit, and you just mentioned it, but it's Mikey Sainristil,
Oh yeah.
and
Yep.
it's Mikey Sainristil in a Dan Quinn defense for me. Because another guy I really liked coming out last year was Jartavius Martin. Um,
Mm,
another slot guy, maybe some safety flexibility.
hmm
Um, and they did go and um, they did have some issues on the outside as well. Um, but I think if you think about the way Dan Quinn likes to operate, and I don't think it'll be to the same degree. I don't think the boxes will be as light as he tried to be in Dallas. I think
hmm
he, sort of figured
Learn
out in
from
the
that.
divisional
Yeah.
round that you're not always going to be able to survive deep into the playoffs doing that. But in the regular season, in particular, if I'm not mistaken, Mike Sanders still didn't miss a tackle this last season.
Yep. Feels
You
right.
could see him as like a dime backer. Um, you could see him in the overhang, and of course, he's going to be your true nickel. You probably won't see him in base unless they really want to get him out on the
Right.
field. But what he's able to do, like at 5'9", like a buck 80 and change,
Yep.
the physicality with which he plays is you can't not notice it. I was trying to watch Chris Jenkins. I was trying to watch like
Uh-huh.
3, 4
Uh-huh.
games of Chris Jenkins, and I couldn't take my eyes off Mike Sanders. So just because, I'm like, "Oh, here's a Chris Jenkins pass rush rep," and then I just see Sanders still like redirect the slant and just knock the guy all the way off his path. And like what he's able to do, like in zone Chuck situate, like he always makes sure that he's affecting his assignment in one
hmm
way or the other. From what I saw, and just the aggressiveness with which he plays, and like I said, if they really want to play some micro ball, on that side of the football with Dan Quinn on whether that's on late downs or trying to get away with it against 12 personnel like like against Green Bay. I think he really will be a factor in the run game.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
could probably live in nickel, like Buffalo does. Like I could
Hmm.
see,
Hmm.
you can see like Mike Hilton kind of
Yes,
potential
that's the name.
with
Hmm.
Samuels. Though you can blitz him. Like he's just got that prototypical frame, but he plays out of it. He plays outside of
Yep.
that smaller frame with just such aggressiveness. And I think with Quinn, like he could be deployed in a lot of different ways without having to take any snaps on the boundary.
There you go, Commanders fans. There you go. Shout out my guy Robertson Vire of Odds On Favorite. The Commanders have made the pick we like category for the first time in this video series. Because yeah, I mean everyone loves this, but every draft Nick and wannabe draft Nick and YouTuber and podcaster was gonna be on whoever drafted Sanders still. And I have my quibbles with the Commanders draft, but this is not one of them. You talk about
Mhm.
how do we instantly plug a hole in a spot of a position group and just not have to worry about that, right? We're this new coaching staff coming in. We let some guys walk. We have some things that we need to figure out. We add some pieces in free agency and the draft. We have to see what holes that we successfully filled, right? What in the hull did we glue together well enough, and then what's still spouting out some water? And it's not going to be nickel corner now. You've got that locked down. And when you actually mentioned like the direct connection to Dan Quinn, the first thing that came to my mind was like prime DeMonte Casey literally being classified as a
Yeah.
linebacker that one year at Atlanta, but also leading the league in interceptions. And like that did make my stomach turn a little bit because like I don't know if that's gonna work in 2024, but I'm really excited about
Yeah.
Sanders still, and I mean wherever he goes because it's gonna be so hard to I think mess him up to look at him and say let's stick you on the outside and see what happens, right? Let's make you do let's have you go backwards a ton, right? Let's have and like no like he is what he is. He's gonna be really good at it, and I think it's very clear and evident. And Dan Quinn's great. Like I have no concerns that he's gonna think he's gonna need to do something else with Sanders. So I think that's a great fit, and I think that's a place for the
Mhm.
Commanders where, okay, if we're going to reestablish some sort of identity here, we're going to get things back on track, get close to the line of scrimmage, even with the defensive back, and just lock that down. I love that one.
Yeah, and
Um,
it like for some people it feels like a knock sometimes, like opposite of like, he's a slot, excuse me, he's a slot
hmm
receiver. Or he's just a nickel corner.
hmm
And he's not being pigeonholed there because like just because of his frame. That's his skill set and that's where
right.
he will excel. So exactly, don't overthink it and don't put him out of position. Just kind of let him go and do what he's good at and figure the rest out. So yeah, definitely with you there.
Absolutely. All right, take us to your third one, your third defensive back in the 2024 NFL draft, and the pick that you liked.
This is another one I just had to do. And that's Kyrie Jackson to my
I knew
Minnesota Vikings.
it. I
Um,
love it.
so the top end of the fourth round, I think is great value for him in a vacuum anyway.
Hmm.
Um, this was pegged as such like a big physical corner class.
Hmm.
Um, but once everybody measured in, like a lot of guys are like 5'11 and a half,
Hmm.
or whatever,
Yep.
or like 6 on the dot. And you don't see a ton of these of the bigger bodies going higher, but I liked Kyrie Jackson's tape. You've obviously got some of that pedigree coming from Alabama originally,
Hmm.
um, and then of course blowing up as a senior at Oregon, but a solid 6'3", just under 200 pounds, pushing 33-inch arms, I think 32 and 3/4, something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
11'1" broad. Um, so like 4.5 in the 40, which is just fine, and he's a long strider and he's got great length.
Hmm.
So using the sideline to his advantage,
Yep.
like this is a play style that's akin to a Sauce Gardner. Now, obviously, that's the apex of that
Hmm. Hmm.
archetype. Um, but he's able to do those sort of things. Just kind of cloud your vision as a receiver with those long arms. And again, he's able to stay in lockstep, largely due to those longer strides. Even if he doesn't quite have the long speed of a Nate Wiggins or whoever you want to throw out there. But when it comes to fit, going to Minnesota and joining a Brian Flores offense, Flores has finally gotten now that type of guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
gotten his uh, Byron Jones, Xavier Howard, these long, tall corners that he likes to sit on the boundary. He made do with, guys like Byron Murphy on the outside constantly, Caleb Evans. And Caleb Evans is a bigger body, but um, I don't think he's quite as skilled as Kyrie, and I don't think the ceiling's as high.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you're looking, they tried to get this archetype in the building and onto the field when they brought Joanne Williams in last preseason, but just didn't work out. I think this is a guy, and again, when you're talking about Flores, you know that uh, Kwesi and O'Connell were sort of monopolizing the first round a little bit. Hey, B flow, just hang on a second. We got to get the quarterback. Then we'll see how the board falls. Let us know who your guys are. And I feel like Kyrie Jackson just had to been one of his guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows you to, when you go to nickel, it allows you to have two bigger bodies on the outside. You can have Byron Murphy shadow the one, or you can stick him in the slot. And of course, you've got the Josh Metellus chess piece. You got the Harrison Smith chess piece, and it allows those guys to really control the middle of the field. And if he can survive on an island, that's great. But a lot of what we'll go back to, it won't be as extreme as last year, but a lot of what Flores will go back to is off zone coverage behind his pressures. He's going to get really creative with the pressures, and you're going to be able to. And Jackson's a very willing tackler as well. The DBs, a lot of times you'll have like a 6-0, 7-0 look all over the line of scrimmage and just put like four on the roof. And I think we're in basketball zones on the back end. And I think he's going to be great for that, the way he'll be able to cover ground. And just kind of at the catch point too, like we really didn't have a guy who wasn't going to get absolutely bodied by T. Higgins off of Jake Browning prayer. Like
Mm-hmm.
we just didn't
Uh,
have we didn't have that guy. But it allows you to deploy Mekhi Blackman and Byron Murphy in a more natural way. And this is if he works out. But I do really like the idea and the fit and the player himself. So one of my buddies texted me like early second round, and he's like, "Who are you thinking at 108?" And I was like, "Kyrie Jackson, maybe Tyler Davis." But no, I was on him the whole way, and just stoked that my team got him.
Friday night, like middle of the night, I was just looking at the board, and that was when I texted and I was like, "Where's Kyrie Jackson go?" And you just Vikings. Actually, I think I asked why did he fall, and you just said
Yep.
Vikings, and that was the whole thing. It was just meant to be. Great fit, perfect for Flores. I mean, just
Yep.
get as many long dudes that can run, and because you mentioned with a Wink Martindale defense right before, like they went and got Deontay Banks last year because it was just like you're on your own, buddy. So just like run as close to the other guys you can and stick a hand up, and that's what his job is going to be here. Um, Hey everyone, just me now, continuing this episode of the Simon and Friends podcast on YouTube. Three corners that we like and three corners we didn't like from the 2024 NFL draft. You may be wondering what's happening here. Technical difficulties on my end with John. So I'm just recording. He and I were able to talk through his did not like list. So I'm just going to relay that information basically to you guys here quickly. Cooley McKinstry, New Orleans, taking him out of Alabama, round 2, pick 9. And this was, hey, what's the fit? Does he fit the right style? Is he going to be physical enough for their brand of outside corner play that we've seen from Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo when he is at his best? Plus, you factor in the fact that they traded up for him, and then you don't have a ready-made role for him right away. Is he pushing a Debo? Are they waiting for Lattimore to get hurt, or are they going to move Lattimore? Or is he going to battle Alante Taylor for that slot position? That's where he's at with Kool-Aid. a good player, but does he quite fit the right style and fit that New Orleans typically likes in their outside receiver? Next one was Max Melton, the corner from Rutgers, going to Arizona. John wasn't sure that this was the right range for him. He thought it might have been a little bit high for Melton to go. I viewed Melton as a second round pick, but it's really just what's the fit within this Cardinals defense as well. My thought with Max Melton was this team tried one of those inside out corners last year in Keitrell Clark, a later round pick. Um, but they tried him on the outside when his profile was clearly as a nickel, and that didn't work. And he got benched and got moved around, didn't quite work out. So, what's the role for Max Melton going to be? Again, John was wondering, is he good enough to be taken here? Should they have taken a more ready-made true slot in Mike Sainristil, who went after Melton? Should they have taken a guy who was more ready-made to be on the outside, like an Ennis Rakestraw, who went later in the round to the Detroit Lions? Instead, you get this guy who, under Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals, or do they view him as another tweener type, and are they going to play that well? So we have to wait and see where they're going to put Melton, where he ends up playing. I think if he ends up just being the full-time nickel, it'll be fine. But if they're bouncing him around too much, like they did with Clark last year, I don't think that's going to go well. And then the final thing for John was more the process of drafting the corners, rather than the guys they necessarily picked. And that was the Chargers in the fifth round. John viewed it as a pretty big need for the Chargers to go with an outside corner here, and then said they wait till the fifth round. And a good point on this is they took two, and you could see this from either side. Hey, they took two swings at a position of need. That's good process. The other is they didn't really know which one they wanted. They take Tarheeb Still out of Maryland, with the second pick in the fifth round. And then just 4 picks later or 3 picks later with the fifth pick, they take Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. Can definitely be viewed as they drafted Still, and then they're like, man, we really wish we took Hart. Oh, look, there he is. Let's go take him. Or was it intentional? Hey, we know we can get both these guys. We think whoever's drafting behind us like Still, so let's take him first. But between one of the two, it'll work. And at the end of the day, Harbaugh is just going to make them both gunners and get out there on special teams, and maybe they'll never play defense. All right, so that was it. That was a quick recap. Thanks for hanging with us through the technical difficulties. Thank you again to John for being here. But those have been our 3 like and 3 dislike cornerback draft picks from the 2024 NFL Draft. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you're following the Simon and Friends podcast on Apple and Spotify as well. And make sure you are checking out all of our shows on Box Score Network at B Score Network on Twitter for updates. Thank you. Have fun and be safe out there.